Voices rising.
Yes, man. You want to take it? Really hot. Oh, well, you know, push days really hot.
Deepest breath of the day. Hold for just a moment, gently stay. Every fear, every tremor will sway when you slowly, slowly.
Right to the point.
Soft as evening rain, on the breath you release now, you are born again. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fill your chest till the fear falls away. Let the rush, let it rise, let it stay. In the stillness, you're stronger than the sway. 10 silent heartbeats, all the storms at bay. In that quiet counting, you remain the day. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold the world in your lungs, let it pray. Every doubt, every shadow gives way. When you slowly let it go away. Every tremor inside needs the calm where your courage resides. Lift your eyes, feel the weight start to slide. On that breath you return to your life. breath you release now, you are born again. Take the deepest breath of the day. Draw it in, let the shadows sway. All the trembling thoughts fall away. As your heart learns how to stay. Silent count upon your tongue, one by one the fears come undone. In this stillness, in this frame, you remember your own name. Take the deepest breath of the day. Draw it in, let the shadows sway. All the trembling thoughts fall away. As your heart learns how to stay. Silent count upon your tongue. One by one the fears come undone. In this stillness, in this frame, you remember. Take the deepest breath of the day. Let the room lean in, let it sway. Silk on my skin, your eyes on my face. Time spills slow in this small, sweet space. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, don't look away. Feel the heat rise where my hips just graze. Stay right here in the slow red haze. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fingertips trace circles on glass. Your name on my tongue, heavy as brass. Laughter stuck soft in the back of my throat. You pull me closer like a private note. Take the deepest breath soft promise in the way you wait. Taste this night before it slips away. Take the deepest breath of the day. Of the day. Take the deepest breath of the day. Let the room lean in, let it sway. Silk on my skin, your eyes on my face. Time spills slow in this small, sweet space. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, don't look away. Feel the heat rise when my hips just grazed. Stay right here in the slow red haze. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fingertips trace circles on glass. Your name on my tongue, heavy as brass. Laughter stuck soft in the back of my throat. You pull me closer like a private note. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, let it ache. Oh, every inch closer, every small sway. Lose your words, let your body say. Take the deepest breath of the day. Count it out, 1 to 10. Let it burn under your skin. Yeah. When you finally let it go slow. Let it fall over me. Warm and take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, make it stay. Every soft promise in the way you wait. Taste this night before it slips away. Take the deepest breath of the day. Of the day. deepest breath of the day. Let it slide all the way down.
Experience, my friends.
My lipstick on your half full glass.
Seconds, then
Your name is shape on the tongue. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it here, right under my
This is
wrist.
your ASMR experience. I need you to like the video. Sometimes
Take the deepest breath of the day. Let it slide all the way down. My lipstick on your half full glass. Your name a shape on my tongue. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it here, right under my lips. Count to forever in the dark. Take the deepest breath of the day. Pull the whole sky into your chest. Every worry, every weight. Count it out on your tongue. 1, 2, feel it run. Up your spine like a spark, chasing shadows from the dark. You were smaller in your head, now your ribs glow red. Heart like a drum in your cage, ready to break from the stage. You got 10 long seconds, face through the flame. Hold that thunder, say your name. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold for 10, let the world wait. Feel the power, don't you fade. You're the storm, you're the quake. Take the deepest breath of the day. Everything bends away. When you exhale the pain, you raise, you rise again. Sweat on your neck like gold, every fear losing hold. You're electric, need of skin, every inhale will begin. Eyes wide, neon in your veins, every step snaps the chains. You are louder than a doubt, feel that pressure turning proud. You got 10 long seconds, face to the flame. Hold back thunder, say your name. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold the 10, let the world wait. Feel the power, don't you fade. You're the storm, you're the quake. Take the deepest breath of the day. Everything bends away. When you exhale the pain, you rise, till the ceiling starts to spin. Or the story being told. Let it go, let it shout. This is your body saying I'm never backing down. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold the storm, let the world wait. Feel the power, don't you fade. You're the storm, you're the quake. Oh, take the deepest breath of the day. Everything bends away. When you exhale the pain, you rise, you rise again. Take the deepest breath of the day. Pull the whole sky into your chest. Every worry,
2026, but that's okay, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to turn that frown upside down. This isn't the complaint station or the complaint department.
Sweat on your neck like gold. Every fear losing hold. You're electric in your skin. Every inhale new begin. Eyes wide neon in your face. Every step
In the
starts to change.
lawnmower man nightmare, which is
Feel that pressure turning brown. You got 10 long seconds. Face to the flame. Hold that thunder. Say your name. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold for 10. Let the world wait.
in the lawnmower man nightmare.
Don't you fade. You're the storm. You're the quake. Take the deepest breath of the day. Everything burns you away. When you exhale all that pain, you
In the lawnmower man nightmare.
you rise again.
In the
Till the ceiling starts to spin. Your story being told. Let it go. Let it shout. This is your body saying, I'm never backing up. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold for 10, let the world wait. Feel the power, don't you fade. You're the storm, you're the quake. Take the deepest breath of the day. Everything burns your way. When you exhale all that pain, you rise. You rise again. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fill your lungs. Let the noise fade away. Close your eyes. Feel your heart keep time. We're about to cross that line. Inhale, count it out, feel the pressure rise. 10 slow seconds, lightning in your spine. Hold it, burning in your chest. Tonight we turn that fire to a yes. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fill your lungs. Let the noise fade away. Close your eyes. Feel your heart keep time. We're about to cross that line. Inhale, count it out. Feel the pressure rise. 10 slow seconds, lightning in your spine. Hold it, burn it, and in your chest. Tonight we turn that fire to a yes. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold for 10, don't still on the counter. You still running its mouth. Phone lit up like a siren. All of it pulling me out. So I take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. Count it out slow. Count it out slow. And let the rush drain away on that small quiet record of in and out. I feel control when I take the deepest breath of the day and hold, then let it go. Traffic stuck in my ribcage. Thoughts jammed up in a queue. Heartbeat tapping the ceiling like it's got somewhere to move. So I take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. Count it out slow. Count it out slow. Let the noise slip away like a tide in regression. Out, then back. I find my shore and I take the deepest breath of the day and hold, then let it go. Maybe peace is this simple. Just a quiet dare to be gentle in a world that's always soon. I just take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. You can breathe too. You can breathe too. Let your shoulders fall away. Make a tiny confession. You're still here. You made it through. So take the deepest breath of the day and hold and let it go. Coffee still on the counter. You're still running its mouth. Phone lit up like a siren. All of it pulling me out. So I take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. Count it out slow. Count it out slow. Let the rush drain away on that small quiet record of in and out. I feel control when I take the deepest breath of the day and hold, then let it go. cage, thoughts jammed up in a queue. Heartbeat tapping the ceiling like it's got somewhere to move. So I take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. Count it out slow. Count it out slow. Let the noise slip away like a tide in regression out and back. I find the shore.
For Congress.
When I take the deepest breath of the day and hold, then let it go. Maybe peace is this simple, just air in a little room, a quiet dare to be gentle in a world that's always soon. I just take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. You can breathe too. You can breathe too. Let the shoulders fall away. Make a tiny confession. You're still here. You made it through. So take the deepest breath of the day. Hold, then let it go.
Oh, let's not waste time. Let's not waste time.
Morning mail on the table. Coffee ring on the page. Phone buzzing like it owns me. Heart sprinting in a cage. But the sunlight hits the window like it's calling me by name. I'm so used to always racing, I forget I can stay. Take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. Count the little cracks in the paint while the world keeps spinning. Let the air stretch. Morning mail on the table, coffee ring on the page, phone buzzing like it owns me, heart sprinting in a cage. But the sunlight hits the window like it's calling me by name. I'm so used to always racing, I forget I can stay. Take the deepest breath of the day and over 10 seconds. Count the little cracks in the paint while the world keeps spinning. Let the air stretch out of your chest like it's making you a second skeleton. Take the deepest breath of the day. Feel your chest till the fear falls away. Let the rush, let it rise, let it stay in the stillness. You're stronger than the sway. 10 seconds. silent heartbeats, all the storms at bay. In that quiet counting, you remake the day. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold the world in your lungs, let it pray. Every doubt, every shadow gives way when you slowly, slowly let it go away. Every ache, every tremor inside needs the calm where your courage resides. Lift your eyes, feel the weight start to slide on that breath. You return to your light. 10 silver heartbeats like a solemn choir. In that steady waiting, you become the fire. It's the love of the day. Hold the world in your arms, let it pray. Every doubt, every shadow gives way when you slowly, slowly, slowly let it go voices rising in your veins, calling you by name, by name. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold for just a moment, gently stay. Every fear, every tremor will sway when you slowly, slowly, slowly let it go away. 10 fading heartbeats, soft as evening rain. On the breath you release now, you are born again. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fill your chest till the fear falls away. Let the rush, let it rise, let it stay. In the stillness, you're stronger than the sway. 10 silent heartbeats. All storms at bay. In that quiet county, you remake the day. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold the world in your lungs, let it pray. Every doubt, every shadow gives way. When you slowly let it go away. Every tremor inside needs the calm where your courage resides. Lift your eyes, feel the weight start to slide. On that breath you return to your life. Then silver heartbeats like a solemn choir in that steady waiting. You become a sign. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold the world in your arms, let it pray. Every doubt, every shadow gives way. When you slowly, let it go away. In the hush of the hear a bright, unseen flame. Voices rising in your veins, calling you by Draw it in, let the shadows sway. All the trembling thoughts fall as your heart learns to stay. Silent count upon your tongue, one by one the fears come undone. In this stillness, in this frame, you remember your own name. Take the deepest breath of the day. Draw it in, let the shadows sway. All the trembling thoughts fall away. As your heart learns how to stay. Silence count upon your tongue. One by one, the fears come undone. In the stillness, in this flame, you remember. Take the deepest breath of the day.
It's so smooth. It's so
Let the
smooth.
morning in its way. Silk on my skin.
If you're an agency owner in
Your
Chicago and
eyes
area,
on
you need a space
my
that is set up for
face.
content production. This is
Time spills slow in this small, sweet space. Take the deepest breath
really
of
a
the
place.
day.
We've all
Hold it for a while, don't look away. Feel the heat rise where my hips just graze. Stay right here in the slow red haze. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fingertips trace circles on glass. Your name on my tongue, heavy as breath. Laughter stuck soft in the back of my throat. You pull me closer like a private note. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, let it in. Oh, every inch closer, every small sway. Lose your words, let your body say. Take the deepest breath of the day. Count it out, 1 to 10. Let it burn under your skin. Yeah, when you finally let it go slow. Let it fall all over me, warm and low. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, make it stay. Every soft promise in the way you wait. Taste this night before it slips away. Take the deepest breath of the day. Of the day. Take the deepest breath of the day. Let the room lean in, let it sway. Silk on my skin, your eyes on my face. Time spills slow in this small, sweet space. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, don't look away. Feel the heat rise when my hips just grazed. Stay right here in the slow red haze. Take the deepest breath of the day. Fingertips trace circles on glass. Your name on my tongue, heavy as brass. Laughter stuck soft in the back of my throat. You pull me closer like a pride note. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for a while, let it ache. Oh, every inch closer, every small sway. Lose your words, let your body say. Take the deepest breath of the day. Count it out, 1 to 10. Let it burn under your skin. Yeah. When you finally let it go slow. Let it fall all over me. Warm and day. Let it slide all the way down. My lipstick on your half-full glass. Your name a shape on my tongue. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it here, right under my ribs. Take the deepest breath of the day. Let it slide all the way down. My lipstick on your half-full glass. Your name a shape on my tongue. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it here, right under my ribs. Count to forever in the dark. Take the deepest breath of the day. Pull the whole sky into your chest. Every worry, every weight. Sun through the blinds, dust in the air, coffee gone cold, your shirt on my chair. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in the waves as my lips confess the rest. Slowly, slowly, let it all escape on the deepest breath of the day. 2 in the afternoon, still in your scent, laugh on my tongue, body a little bent. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in the waves as my lips confess the rest. Slowly, slowly, let it all escape on the deepest breath of the day. Every exhale tells on me. Every soft sigh spells your history. One more inhale, right where you lay. Then I give you back to the air you gave. deepest breath of the day. Just in coffee gone cold, your shirt on my chair. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in the waves as my lips confess the rest. Slowly, slowly, let it all escape. On the deepest breath of the day. 2 in the afternoon, still in your scent, laugh on my tongue, body a little bent. Take the deepest breath of the Sun through the blinds, dust in the air, coffee gone cold, your shirt on my chair. Take the deepest breath of the day, hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in waves as my lips confess the rest. Slowly, slowly, let it all escape on the deepest breath of the day. 2 in the afternoon, still in your sins, laugh on my tongue, body a little bent. Take the deepest breath of the day, hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in the waves as my lips confess the rest. Slowly, slowly, let it all escape on the deepest breath of the day. Every exhale tells on me. Every soft sigh spells your history. One more inhale, right where you lay. Then I give you back to the air you gave. Take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in the waves as my lips confess the rest. Slowly, slowly, let it all escape on the deepest breath of the day. Sun through the blind, dust in the air, coffee gone cold, your shirt on my chair. Take the deepest breath of the day, hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in the waves as my lips confess the rest. Slowly, slowly, let it all escape deepest breath of the day. 2 in the afternoon, still in your scent, life on my tongue, body a little bent. Take the deepest breath of the day, hold it right here in my chest. Let your name get lost in the waves as my lips confess the last Now here is a solar system inside a galaxy. And one of the peculiarities of this solar system is that at least on the planet Earth, the thing peoples. In just the same way that an apple tree apples. Now maybe 2 million years ago, somebody came from another galaxy in a flying saucer and had a look at the solar system. And they looked it over and shrugged their shoulders and said, just a bunch of rocks. And they went away. Later on, maybe 2 million years later, they came around and they looked at it again. And they said, excuse me, we thought it was a bunch of rocks, but it's peopling. And it's alive after all.
Because that's biologically relevant to that objective.
Because you see, we grow out of this world in exactly the same way that the apples grow on the apple tree. If evolution means anything, it means that. But you see, we curiously twist it. We say, well, first of all, in the beginning, there was nothing but gas and rock. And then intelligence happened to arise in it, you know, like a sort of fungus or slime on the top of the whole thing. But we're thinking in a way, you see, that disconnects the intelligence from the rocks. Where there are rocks, watch out. Watch out, because the rocks are going eventually to come alive.
You're dope for listening to Alan Watts.
No, Jay, you're dope, bro. Takes a player to know a player.
Has not
Player, player!
in promoting the study of other than the Christian religion. Because you see, if you know in the first place that you have the true religion, there really is no point in studying any other one. And you can very quickly find reasons for showing them to be inferior. Because that was a foregone conclusion. They had to be. Because if, for example, you get into discussions as to whether
We got a bull rush, Jay.
profound and spiritual character than Jesus
I
Christ,
think there's a bull rush coming.
you arrive at your decision on the basis of a scale of values, which is, of course, Christian. And in this sense, the judge and the advocate are the same. Now, as you know, I'm not being very fair. Very kind.
Bull rush! Bull rush, bull rush, bull rush!
In this,
We got a bull rush! Dennis the Menace, the bull!
because I believe that there is a strong distinction between
Dennis is sending me gold coins. We had to send him some extra positive vibrations. Dennis gets all the ladies this week.
It's from the Anglo-Saxon
No, but for real, you do
Appreciate it for the
a lot of these
podcast.
stated saying
pertaining to meditation
it's
and
a
Alan
fact
Watts and God is.
that
I think the
universe
least
will
that
turn
I
out
could
to be
read,
thus
honestly,
and so.
is send a few coins
And in this sense,
because the
therefore,
effort that it
belief
takes
precludes
to
the possibility of
have
faith.
meditation
Because faith is openness to truth, to reality, whatever it may turn out to be. I want to know the truth. That is the attitude of faith. And therefore, to use ideas about the universe and about God as something to hang on to in the spirit of Rock of Ages cleft for me, and there's something very rigid about a rock. And we are finding our rock getting rather worn out in an age where it becomes more and more obvious that our world is a floating world. It's a world floating in space where all positions are relative and any point may be regarded as the center. A world which doesn't float on anything. And therefore, the religious attitude appropriate to our time is not one of clinging to rocks, but of learning to swim. And you know that if you get in the water and you've nothing to hold on to, and you try to behave as you would on dry land, you will drown. But if, on the other hand, you trust yourself to the water and let go, you will float. And this is exactly the situation of faith. The Christian proverb is that man's extremity is God's opportunity. And so the people, in other words, have to get desperate. Imagine the idea that the moment you were born, you were kicked off the edge of a precipice and you're falling. As you fell, a great lump of rock came with you and is traveling alongside you. And you're clinging to it for dear life and thinking, gee, I've got to hold on to this, see? Well, it doesn't do a thing for you. And it's only making you anxious. And it's only when you understand that it doesn't do a thing for you that you let go and relax. So everybody's in this situation. We're all completely insecure. We're all headed straight for death as if we had been condemned by a judge. And yet here we are all clinging on to things. And we have all sorts of alibis for doing this. We say, well, I have responsibilities for my dependents and I've got to cling on. But all you're doing is you're teaching your dependents to cling the same way as you are. And making them miserable by learning to go on surviving compulsively. So the thing is, same way, if you're caught in a torrent, and you try to get out of it by swimming against it, you just wear yourself out and you're still carried along with it.
Shut
The
up.
sensible thing to do is to turn around and swim with it.
But
And if you want to get out of it, swim towards the edge. But go with it. Same way when you're sailing. Always keep the wind in your sails. If you want to go against the wind, tack. But use the wind. So it's this way, we're all in this great stream of change, which we call life. We are the stream. If you imagine you're separate from it and you're being carried along by it as if you were a cork, that's a delusion. You're a wave of the stream itself. So get with it.
That's some wisdom.
I had a friend who was studying Zen in Japan, and he got pretty desperate to produce the answer of who he really is. And on his way to an interview with the master to give an answer to the problem, he noticed a very common sight in Japan, a big bullfrog sitting around in the garden. And he swooped this bullfrog up in his hand and dropped it in the sleeve of his kimono. And then he went into the master, and to give the answer of who he was, he suddenly produced the bullfrog. And the master said, too intellectual. In other words, this answer is too contrived. It's too much like Zen. You've been reading too many books. It's not the genuine thing. And so the method of teaching used by these great Eastern teachers is to make fools persist but very rigorously and very consistently and very hard. Now, if you go to a Zen teacher, he'll say, well, I have nothing to teach. There is no problem. Everything's perfectly clear. You think that one over. You say he's probably being cagey. But the teacher says, quite honestly, I haven't anything to tell you. As I said to you in the beginning of this talk,
Bro, shit, Abby threw up. No, when Jordan in Chicago was, we is not finna fuck up nobody that's having a nice night. Y'all have a nice night. Shit, Abby, fuck this one.
Because
Bitch, stop talking to me like you stupid.
there's nothing that he teaches.
I wasn't even talking to you,
He's
bitch.
what they call
Now you
Hinduism
talking to me. Now I'm talking to you.
and it's supposed to be the
Like,
ultimate reality. But as you know,
hey, bitch, why the fuck you add us to this comment? Bro, we want to take over this bitch. Hey, Jay. Who is this white man? Hey, this is my little group chat. The man sent us to the group chat. He sent y'all
Why y'all being like the baby kids, bro?
Why y'all being like the baby kids? I'm grown as fuck. Don't never put grown like y'all. I am grown as hell. I can't speak for the next motherfucker, but I'm grown as fuck.
Hold on, hey, I'm trying to call me a little boy. We can sit outside. What you trying to do? I'm trying to bump dance. Let's do it, bitch. You clearly don't got shit to lose. Ain't nobody trying to fight your ass. What you trying to bump dance?
Hey, remove him.
Bump dance, nigga. We can do that. We can bump dance. Oh, my mama, big trans. What you trying to smoke this with? Yeah, we can blow this little nigga down. This nigga know. You know what I mean?
Anyways, I be no sugar daddy. I killed two niggas. Exactly.
I killed three niggas. We can do it, nigga. I'm sure.
Alright, let me stop trolling. Hey, bro, this is a different group chat. There's nobody in here. I got two bitch ass.
I got two switches in the dress for your bitch ass. Okay.
I'll give you a gun so we can shoot it. Y'all see that he don't get.
Y'all niggas don't got school.
He ain't y'all up. I feel like you a dick sucker, bitch.
Hey, how long you need to
Stop fucking with me, my son. Hey, since you wanna play crazy, hey, Drake just sent another one in real life. Drake just sent another one. She sent to Chicago when she said this girl going crazy. I'm gone.
The state of mystical illumination, although it may, in its sudden onset, be accompanied by a sensation, tremendous luminescence and transparency. As you get used to it, it's just like everyday life. Here are the things that you formerly thought were separate individuals, and here is you, who you formerly thought was merely confronting these other people. When the great Dr. D.T. Suzuki was asked, what is it like to be enlightened? He said it's just like ordinary everyday experience, except about 2 inches off the ground. Because what is altered is not the way
I'm back
you
in this
sense it.
bitch ass little dude. Hey, Jay, where you from? I'm trying to book Jens, man.
Stay
Your
back, bro.
definitions of what you see.
I'm trying to book Jens. What you trying to do, little boy?
Bro, why don't you listen to some motivation, bro? That way I can shoot.
What? Shut your bitch ass up. Bump Jens.
Niggas ain't no shit. I smoked these last.
Why do y'all keep saying this? Bump Jens. Bitch ass. What you trying to do? Shamir, why is you here harassing me? Why do you say this?
So that I discover that I don't describe
They can hear why you did. Actually, I want to be my friend. Hey, who this corny ass white nigga? Bitch ass Shamir, leave these people alone. Smoke your ass. Why not just the cop?
of the same process.
Hey, y'all want to be my friends?
Niggas gotta understand what they're doing.
I'm not nothing myself. We don't call, we call those like, we call those writers. I'm not nothing. I'm very trying.
In the history of philosophy and poetry and art, we always find the interchange of...
What are y'all watching over
Send me a
here?
picture of yourself.
I'm finna change my profile picture right now.
The prickly people are advocates of intellectual...
I'm scared. People gonna talk about me.
They
You said you from
take on precise statistics.
I'm leaving.
And they have
Bye.
a
Have a nice day.
attitude in their voices, and you know this very well in academic circles, where there are people who are always edgy like that, and they accuse other people of being disgustingly vague and miasmic and mystical. But the vague, miasmic, and mystical people accuse the prickly people of being mere skeletons with no flesh on their bones. And they say to you, you just rattle. You're not really a human being. You know the words, but you don't know the music. So therefore, if you belong to the prickly type, you hope that the ultimate constituent of matter is particles. If you belong to the gooey type, you hope it's waves. If you are prickly, you're a classicist. And if you're gooey, you're a romanticist. And going back into medieval philosophy, if you're prickly, you're a nominalist. If you're gooey, you're a realist. And so it goes. But we know very well that this natural universe is neither prickles nor goo exclusively. It's gooey prickles and prickly goo. And you see, it all depends on your level of magnification. If you've got your magnification on something so that the focus is clear, you've got a prickly point of view. You've got structure, shape, clearly outlined, sharply defined. You look out of focus, it's going to go bleh, and you've got goo. But we're always playing with the two, because it's like the question is the world basically stuff like matter, or is it basically structure? Well, we find out, of course, today that in science we don't consider the idea of matter, of there being some sort of stuff. Because supposing you wanted to describe stuff, in what terms would you describe it? You always have to describe it in terms of structure, something countable, something that can be designated as a pattern. So we never get to any basic stuff. There is a sense in which the universe is purely game, but not in the sense of a one-upmanship game, but in the sense of music, which is lalling with sound, is dancing delightfully with sound, you see. And nobody was ever able to give a better account of what it's all about. I mean, let's take the traditional Christian account of what the angels do in heaven. Why they sit around the throne of God and sing Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. And they're going, that's not just Alleluia in a sort of formal way, but they're going, they're really swinging. And by the time you know where they are, the swinging has reached such fantastic proportions. And they've thought out the most amazing little goody-doody-doody-doody-doos that you've got the whole physical universe happening. Yeah, that's the way it starts. And so, I mean, this game is great.
The following program was drawn from a seminar called Learning the Human Game. It was recorded in Michigan in April of 1965. In this talk, Alan Watts notes the 4 questions that, quote, all philosophers have discussed since the beginning of recorded time. 1. Who started it? 2. Are we going to make it? 3. Where are we going to put it? And 4. Who's going to clean it up? He then poses the 5th significant question. Is it serious? The program is called The Coincidence of Opposites. Here's Alan Watts.
It's thinks is posh, anyway. But everybody, by virtue of being a human being, is willy-nilly a metaphysician. That is to say, everybody starts from certain fundamental assumptions as to what is the good life, what he wants, what are his, shall we say, axioms for living. And I find that psychologists tend to be blind to these fundamental assumptions. Maybe it's truer of psychiatrists than it is of psychologists, but they tend to feel that they are scientists. They're rather bending over backwards to have a scientific status, because that, of course, is fashionable in our age. But you know, it's so amusing that when, say, let's take psychoanalysis, for example, as pointed out to many philosophers, that their philosophical ideas are capable of being shown to have a psychoanalytic reference. For example, John Wisdom wrote a book about the philosophy of Berkeley, in which he attributed a great deal of his point of view to his experiences in toilet training as a child. The philosopher is very grateful to the psychoanalyst for revealing to him his unconscious and its emotional contents. But the psychoanalyst must in turn await a revelation from the philosopher as to his philosophical unconscious and the unexamined assumptions which lie in it. So, if I may start by insulting your intelligence with what is called the most elementary lesson, the thing that we should have learned before we learned 1, 2, 3 and ABC, but somehow was overlooked. Now, this lesson is quite simply this, that any experience that we have through our senses, whether of sound or of light or of touch, is a vibration. And a vibration has two aspects, one called on and the other called off. Vibration seems to be propagated in waves, and every wave system has crests and it has troughs. And so life is a system of now you see it, now you don't. And these two aspects always go together. For example, sound is not pure sound. It is a rapid alternation of sound and silence. And that's simply the way things are. Only you must remember that the crest and the trough of a wave are inseparable. Nobody ever saw crests without troughs or troughs without crests, just as you don't encounter in life people with fronts but no backs. Just as you don't encounter a coin that has heads but no tails. And although the heads and the tails, the fronts and the backs, the positives and the negatives are different, they're at the same time one. And one has to get used fundamentally to the notion that different things can be inseparable. That what is explicitly two can at the same time be implicitly one. If you forget that, very funny things happen. If therefore we forget, you see, that black and white are inseparable, and that existence is constituted equivalently by being and non-being, then we get scared. And we have to play a game called, black might win. And once we get into the fear that black, the negative side, might win, we are compelled to play the game, but white must win. And from that start all our troubles. Because you see, the human awareness is a very odd mechanism. I don't think mechanism is quite the right word, but it'll do for the moment. That is to say, we have as a species specialized in a certain kind of awareness, which we call conscious attention. And by this we have the faculty of examining the details of life very closely. We can restrict our gaze, and it corresponds somewhat to the peripheral field the central field of vision in the eyes, we have central vision, we have peripheral vision. Central vision is that which we use for reading, for all sorts of close work. It's like using a spotlight, whereas peripheral vision is more like using a floodlight. Now, civilization and civilized human beings for maybe 5,000 years, maybe much longer, have learned to specialize in concentrated attention. Even if a person's attention span is short, he is, as it were, wavering his spotlight over many fields. The price which we pay for specialization in conscious attention is ignorance of everything outside its field. I would rather say ignorance than ignorance. Because if you concentrate on a figure, you tend to ignore the background. You tend, therefore, to see the world in a disintegrated aspect. You take separate things and events seriously, imagining that these really do exist, when actually they have the same kind of existence as an individual's interpretation of a Rorschach plot. They're what you make out of it. In fact, our physical world is a system of inseparable differences. Everything exists with everything else. But we contrive not to notice that, because what we notice is what is noteworthy. And we notice it in terms of notations. Numbers, words, images. What is notable, noteworthy, notated, noticed, is what appears to us to be significant, and the rest is ignored as insignificant. And as a result of that, we select from the total input that goes to our senses only a very small fraction. And this causes us to believe that we are separate beings, isolated by the boundary of the epidermis from the rest of the world. You see, this is also the mechanism involved in not noticing that black and white go together. Not noticing that every inside has an outside. That the inside, what's inside goes on inside your skin is inseparable from what goes on outside your skin. You see that, for example, in the science of ecology, one learns that a human being is not an organism in an environment, but is an organism-environment. That is to say, a unified field of behavior. If you describe carefully the behavior of any organism, you cannot do so without at the same time describing the behavior of the environment. And by that you know that you've got a new entity of study. You are describing the behavior of a unified field. But you must be very careful indeed not to fall into old Newtonian assumptions about the billiard ball nature of the universe. The organism is not the puppet of the environment, being pushed around by it. Nor, on the other hand, is the environment the puppet of the organism, being pushed around by the organism. The relationship between them is, to use John Dewey's word, transactional. The transaction being a situation like buying and selling, in which there is no buying unless somebody sells, and no selling unless somebody buys. So that fundamental relationship between ourselves and the world, which is in an old-fashioned way by people such as Skinner, who has not updated his philosophy, interpreted in terms of Newtonian mechanics. He interprets the organism as something determined by the total environment. He doesn't see That's a dirty word in the modern academic scientific environment. But if a mystic is one who is sensibly or even sensuously aware of his inseparability as an individual from the total existing universe, he is simply a person who has become sensible, aware through his senses of the way ecologists see the world. So when I'm in academic circles, I don't talk about mystical experience. I talk about ecological awareness. And so the next aspect of our metaphysical introduction must be about games. You know, I think there are really four questions that all philosophers have discussed from the beginning of recorded time. First is who started it. The second is are we going to make it? The third is where are we going to put it? And the fourth is who's going to clean up? When you think these over, it poses a fifth question. Is it serious? And that's the one I want to discuss. Is existence serious? Like you say, doctor, after he's looked at your X-ray picture, is it serious? What does it mean? Means am I in danger of not continuing to survive? The question is, ought I to continue to survive? In other words, must I survive? If life is serious, then of course I must survive. If it is not serious, it really doesn't matter whether I do or I don't. Now, in Western culture, it is practically a basic assumption that existence is serious. This is particularly true among people who call themselves existentialists. When they talk about a person who exists authentically, they mean that he takes his life seriously and other people's lives seriously. But the poet and essayist G.K. Chesterton once observed that the angels fly because they take themselves lightly. And if I may venture into mythology, if the angels take themselves lightly, how much more so the Lord of the angels? But you see, we have been brought up in a mythological context where the Lord God definitely does take himself seriously and is indeed the serious person. So that when we go into church, laughter is discouraged in the same way as it's discouraged in court. This is a serious matter, and everybody has to have the right expression on their faces. Because this is the great, great authority figure. This is Grandpa. This is kids, you know. And we don't realize that he has a twinkle in his eye. But the basis of it all is this, then. If we say, you must survive, or I must survive, life is earnest, and I've got to go on, then your life is a drag, and not a game. Now, it's my contention, my personal opinion, this is my basic metaphysical axiom, shall we put it that way, that existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at. But it is best understood by analogy with music. Because music, as an art form, is essentially playful. We say you play the piano. You don't work the piano. Why? say travel. When you travel, you are trying to get somewhere. And of course, we, because being a very compulsive and purposive culture, are busy getting everywhere faster and faster and faster till we eliminate the distance between places. I mean, with the modern jet travel, you can arrive almost instantaneously. What happens as a result of that is that the two ends of your journey become the same place. So you eliminate the distance, you eliminate the journey. Because the fun of the journey is to travel, not to obliterate travel. So then, in music, though, one doesn't make the end of a composition the point of the composition. If that was so, the best conductors would be those who played fastest. And there would be composers who wrote only finales. People go to a concert just to hear one crashing chord, because that's the end. Same way in dancing. You don't aim at a particular spot in the room. That's where you should arrive. The whole point of the dancing is the dance. Now, but we don't see that as something brought by our education into our everyday conduct. We've got a system of schooling which gives a completely different impression. It's all graded. And what we do is we put the child into the corridor of this grade system with a kind of, come on, kitty, kitty, kitty. And yeah, you go to kindergarten, you know. That's a great thing because when you finish that, you'll get into first grade. And then come on, first grade leads to second grade and so on, and then you get out of grade school, you go to high school, and it's revving up, the thing is coming. But then you're going to go to college, and by Jove, then you get into graduate school, and when you're through with graduate school, you go out to join the world. And then you get into some racket where you're selling insurance, and they've got that quota to make. All the time, this thing is coming. It's coming, it's coming, that great thing, the success you're working for. Then when you wake up one day about 40 years old, you say, my God, I've arrived. I'm there. And you don't feel very different from what you've always felt. And there's a slight letdown because you feel there's a hoax. And there was a hoax, a dreadful hoax. They made you miss everything by expectation. Look at the people who live to retire and put those savings away. And then when they're 65, they don't have any energy left. They're more or less impotent. And they go and rot in an old people's senior citizens community. Because we simply cheated ourselves the whole way down the line. We thought of life by analogy with a journey, with a pilgrimage, which had a serious purpose at the end. And the thing was to get to that end, success or whatever it is, or maybe heaven after you're dead. But we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or dance while the music was being played. But you had to do that thing. You didn't let it happen. And so, in this way, the human being sometimes becomes an organism for self-frustration. Let's take Korzybski called man a time binder. That means that he's the animal peculiarly aware of the time sequence. And as a result of this, is able to do some very remarkable things. He can predict. He studies what's happened in the past, and he says the chances are so-and-so of that happening again. And so he predicts. All this is very useful, to be able to predict, because that has survival value. But at the same time, it creates anxiety. You pay for this increased survival ability involved in prediction by knowing that in the end you won't succeed. They're all going to fall apart by one way or another. It might happen tomorrow, might happen 50 years from now. But it all comes apart in the end. And people get worried about that. They get anxious. So what they gained on the roundabout, they lost on the swings. So then, if you see, on the other hand, that existence, this is, as I said, my basic metaphysical assumption, which I want to conceal from you, that existence is musical in nature. That is to say that it is not serious. It is the play of all kinds of patterns. We can look upon different creatures as we look at different games, as we look at chess, checkers, backgammon, tennis, the tree game, the beetle game, the grass game. Or you can look at them as you look at different styles of music, mazurkas, waltzes, sonata, etc., all down the line. There are all these different things doing their stuff. They're going different rhythms. And we're doing that. If you were in a flying saucer from Mars or somewhere and you came and looked, try and make out what was living on this world, from about 10,000 feet at night or early morning, you would see these great ganglia with tentacles going out all over the place. And early in the morning, you see little blobs of luminous particles going into the middle of them. See? Then in the late afternoon or early evening, it would spit them all out again. And they say, well, this thing breathes. And it does it in a special rhythm. It goes in and out, in and out, in and out once every 24 hours. But then it rests a day and doesn't spit so much. It spits in a different way. That's a kind of irregularity, and then it starts spinning all over again the same way. I say that's very interesting. That's this kind of thing we have. See, this is something that goes this way. Now, existence, you see, is something that is spontaneous. The Chinese word for nature, zhidan, means that which happens of itself. Your hair grows by itself. Your heart beats by itself. You breathe pretty much by itself. Your glands secrete their essences by themselves. You don't have voluntary control over these things. So we say it happens spontaneously. So when you go to sleep and you try to go to sleep, you interfere with the spontaneous process of going to sleep. Try to breathe, real hard, and you find you get balled up in your breathing. So, if you're going to be human, you just have to trust yourself to have bowel movements and go to sleep and digest your food. Of course, if something goes seriously wrong and you need a surgeon, that's another matter. But by and large, the healthy human being doesn't, right from the start of life, need surgical interference. And he lets it happen by itself. So with the whole picture, that is fundamental. You've got to let go and let it happen. Because if you don't, you're going to be all clutched up. You're going to be constantly trying to do what can happen healthily only if you don't try. And when you think of it, what people really want to do with their time, what do they do when they're not being pushed around and somebody's telling them what to do? They like to make rhythms. They listen to music, they dance, they sing, or they do something of a rhythmic nature, playing cards or bowling, or raising their elbows. Everybody wants to spend their time swinging. That's the nature of this whole thing we're in, you see, like the swing. That's why it does it.
Audio Wisdom titles have been selected from hundreds of hours of original live recordings to bring you the ideas and insights of some of the most important thinkers of our time. Please join us again as we present notable authors and speakers in historic lectures and intimate conversations as they share their thoughts with you in their own words. For a complete catalog of offerings, please call 1-800-969-2887 or write to Audio Wisdom, Post Office Box 2309, San Anselmo, California, 94979. In this public radio broadcast from 1960, which was heard originally live on KPFA in Berkeley, California, Alan Watts explores the origin of the desire for meaningfulness. In the search for satisfaction, what is it that is really sought or yearned after? The talk turns from academic discussion into poetry. What is the meaning of significance? If trees, stones, clouds, and stars are the Alleluia chorus of the universe. Alan Watts, The Sense of Nonsense.
It's very commonly said that the root of most human unhappiness is the sense that one's life has no meaning. This is, I suppose, most frequently said in circles interested in psychotherapy, because the feeling of meaninglessness is often equated with the existence of neurosis. And so many activities into which one is encouraged to enter, philosophies one is encouraged to believe, and religions one is encouraged to join, are commended on the basis of the fact that they give life a meaning. And I think it's very fascinating to think out what this idea itself means, or what it is intended when it's said that life has to have a purpose. I remember so well as a child listening to sermons in church in which the preacher would constantly refer to God's purpose for you and for me, and I could never make out what it was, because when questioned about this, the Reverend gentleman seemed to be evasive. What is the purpose of God for the world? We used to sing a hymn too. God is working his purpose out as year succeeds to year. And the nearest clue one got to it was in the sort of refrain of the hymn. Nearer and nearer draws the time that shall surely be, when the earth shall be filled with the glory of God as the waters cover the sea. And of course that raises the question, what is the glory of God? Well now, it's pretty obvious, I think, that when we talk about life having or not having a meaning, we're not using quite the ordinary sense of the word meaning as the attribute of a sign. We're not saying, are we, that we expect this natural universe to behave as if it were a collection of words signifying something other than themselves. It isn't a point of view which would reduce our lives and the world merely to the status of signs. And it's obviously in some different sense than that Goethe wrote his famous lines at the end of Faust. Alles Vergängliche ist nur ein Gleichnis. Forgive my pronunciation of German. All that is mortal or all that is perishable is but a symbol. And so, a symbol of what? What do we want to feel? What would satisfy us as being the meaning behind this world? It's so often, that we don't follow our ideas and our desires through. Most of the things that we want very fervently are things that we've only half glimpsed. Our ideals are very often suggestions, hints, and we don't know really exactly what we mean when we think about it. But there is this obscure sense in which we feel that life ought to have significance and be a symbol in at least that sense, if not just so parried a symbol as a mere sign. Or it also may mean that life is meaningful. An individual feels that his life amounts to something when he belongs and fits in with the execution of some group enterprise. He feels he belongs in a plan, and this too seems to give people a sense of great satisfaction. But we have to pursue that question further too. Why is it that a plan, why is it that fellowship with other people gives the sense of meaning? Does it come down perhaps to another sense of meaning? That life is felt to be meaningful when one is fully satisfied one's biological urges, including the sense of hunger, the sense of love, the sense of self-expression in activity, and so on. But then again, we have to push that inquiry further. What do our biological urges really point towards? Are they just, however, things always projected towards a future? Is biology and its processes nothing but going on towards going on towards going on? Or there's a fourth and more theological sense of the meaning of life. In all theistic religions, at any rate, the meaning of life is God himself. In other words, all this world means a person. It means a heart. It means an intelligence. And the relationship of love between God and man is the meaning of the world. The sight of God is the glory of God, and so on. But again here, there's something to be further pursued. What is it that we want in love with a person, and even a person in the sense of the Lord God? What is the content of it? What is it that we are really yearning after? Well, now, if we go back to the first point, taking Goethe's words that all that is transitory is but a symbol, and that we want to feel that all things have significance. It does seem to me that there's a sense in which we often use the word significance, where the word seems to be chosen quite naturally, and yet at the same time it's not quite the right word. We say, for example, often of music, that we feel it to be significant, when just at the same time we don't mean that it expresses some particular kind of concretely realizable emotion, and certainly it's not imitating the noises of nature. Program music, would simply imitate something else, and it deliberately sets out to express sadness or joy or whatever, is not the kind of thing I mean. So often when one listens to the beautiful arabesque character of the Baroque composers, Bach or Vivaldi, it is felt to be significant, not because it means something other than itself, but because it is so satisfying as it is. And we use then this word significance. So often, in those moments when our impetuous seeking for fulfillment cools down, and we give ourselves a little space to watch things, as if they were worth watching, ordinary things. And in those moments when our inner turmoil has really quietened, we find significance in things that we wouldn't expect to find significant at all. I mean, this is after all the art of those photographers who have such genius in turning the camera towards such things as peeling paint on an old door, or mud and sand and stones on a dirt road, and showing us there that if we look at it in a certain way, those things are significant. but we can't say significant of what so much as significant of themselves. Or perhaps significance then is the quality of a state of mind in which we notice that we're overlooking the significance of the world by our constant quest for it later. All this language is, of course, quite naturally vague and imprecise, because I think the wrong word is used. And yet not entirely the wrong word, because, as I said, it comes so naturally to us. It was Clive Bell, the great aesthetician, who wanted to say that all the characteristic of art, especially the characteristic of aesthetic success in painting, was the creation of significant form. Again, a very vague, imprecise expression. But it certainly is an attribute, not only of those moments in which we are tranquil inside, but also of moments of deep spiritual experience, of what would be called moksha, or release in Hinduism, or satori in Zen. That in those moments, the significance of the world seems to be the world, seems to be what is going on now. And we don't look any further. The scheme of things seems to justify itself at every moment of its unfoldment. I pointed out that this was particularly a characteristic of music. It's also a characteristic of dancing. And in the sensation of belonging with one's fellow man, in the carrying out of some significant pattern of life, which I mentioned as a second sense of the world being meaningful. Again, the character of this feeling is, again, something that is fulfilled in itself. But to dance is not to be going anywhere. When we dance in the ballroom, we don't have a destination, we're just going around the room. And it's in doing this, it's in executing the pattern, in singing the music with other people, that even though this doesn't point to anything outside itself, we again get the sense of meaning. And this is also obviously the case so often in the satisfaction of the biological urges. Does one live to eat or eat to live? I'm not at all sure about this. I'm sure I very often live to eat, because sitting around a table with people, I don't like eating alone. And enjoying food is absolutely delightful. And we're not thinking when we do this, at least certainly I'm not, that we have to eat because it's good for us. And we've got to throw something down the hatch, as Henry Miller said, and swallow a dozen vitamins, just because our system needs nourishment. I remember quite recently there was an article in the Consumer Reports about bread, and there had been some correspondence and protests saying that the bread one bought, white bread one buys in the stores, is perfectly inedible and lacking in nutrition, and that it was much better to eat peasant-type breads, rough pumpernickel and things of that kind. And the experts replied that our white bread is perfectly full of good nutrients, and there's nothing really the matter with it at all. Well, I felt like saying, it doesn't matter perhaps of the bread being deficient in the essential vitamins. Bread isn't medicine, it's food, and one's complaint against it is that it's bad cookery. It tastes of nothing. And we do tend, don't we, to look upon food so often for what it will do for us rather than the delight of eating it. But if the satisfaction of biological urges is to mean anything, surely the point of these urges is not the fatuous one of mere survival. We might say the point of the individual is simply that he contributes to the welfare of the race. And the point of the race is that it reproduces itself to reproduce itself to reproduce itself and keep going. Now that isn't really a point at all. That's just fatuous. Surely the race keeps going because going is great, because it's fun. And if it isn't, and never will be, then there's no point, obviously, in going. I mean, looking at it from the most hedonistic standpoint. But then when we come to the question, what is fun? What is the joy of it? Again, we come down to something that can't very well be explained in the ordinary language of meaning, of leading to something else. And this, I think, becomes preeminently true if we think of it in theological language. That the meaning of life is God. In any of the theistic religions, what is God doing? What is the meaning of God? Why does he create the universe? What is the content of the love of God for his creation? Well, there's the frank answer of the Hindus, that the Godhead manifests the world because of Leela, which is the Sanskrit word for play. And this is likewise said in the Hebrew scriptures, or the Christian Old Testament, in the book of Proverbs, where there is a marvelous speech by the divine wisdom, Sophia, which, in describing the function of the divine wisdom in the creation of the world, in other words, is a manifestation of the wisdom of God. Wisdom uses the phrase that in producing men and animals and all the creatures of the earth, wisdom is playing. And it was the delight of wisdom to play before the presence of God. And when it is likewise said in the scriptures that the Lord God created the world for his pleasure, this again means, in a sense, for play. And certainly this seems to be what the angels in heaven are doing according to the traditional symbolic descriptions of heaven. They are ringed around the presence of the Almighty, calling out, Alleluia, 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 through all eternity. Well, Alleluia may have meant something originally, but as it's used now, it doesn't mean anything except, well, in our own slang, whoopee. It's an exclamation of nonsensical delight. And it was Dante in the Paradiso who described the song of the angels as the laughter of the universe. And this sense of nonsense as the theme of the divine activity comes out also very strongly in the book of Job. I always think that the book of Job is the most profound book in the whole Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. Because here is the problem of the man, the righteous man, who has suffered. And all his friends try to rationalize it and say, well, you must have suffered because you really had a secret sin after all and deserve the punishment of God, or because rationalize it somehow. And when they've had their say, the Lord God appears on the scene and says, who is this that darkeneth counsel with words without knowledge? And then proceeds to ask Job and his friends a series of absolutely unanswerable conundrums, pointing out all the apparent irrationality and nonsense of his creation. Why, for example, he said, do I send rain upon the desert where no man is? Most commentators on the book of Job end with the remark that, well, this poses the problem of suffering and the problem of evil, but doesn't really answer it. And yet in the end himself, Job seems to be satisfied. He somehow surrenders to the apparent unreasonableness of the Lord God. And this is not, I think, because Job is beaten down, and that he's unduly impressed with the royal, monarchical, and paternalistic authority of the deity, and doesn't dare to answer back. He realizes that somehow these very questions are the answer. I think of all the commentators on the book of Job, the person who came closest to this point was old G.K. Chesterton. He once made the glorious remark that it is one thing to look with amazement at a gorgon or a griffin, a creature who doesn't exist, but quite another thing to look at a hippopotamus, a creature who does exist and looks as if he doesn't. In other words, that all this strange world, with its weird forms, like hippopotami, and when you look at them from a certain point of view, stones and trees and water and clouds and stars, when you look at them from a certain point of view and don't take them for granted, they're as weird as any hippopotamus, or any imagination of fabulous beasts of gorgons and griffins and things like that. They are just plain improbable. And it is in this sense, I think, that they are the Alleluia, as it were, the nonsense song. Why do we love nonsense? Why do we love Lewis Carroll with his "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave, all mimsy were the borogoves and the monraths outgrabe"? Why is it that all those old English songs are full of "Fol-de-riddle Ido" and "Hey nonny nonny" and all those babbling choruses? Why is it that when we get hep with jazz, we just go boody 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 boo and so on and enjoy ourselves swinging it? It is this participation in the essential, glorious nonsense that is at the heart of the world, that isn't going anywhere, that is a dance. But it seems that only in moments of unusual insight and illumination that we get the point of this, and find that thus the true meaning of life is no meaning, that its purpose is no purpose, and that its sense is nonsense. But still, we want to use about it the word significant. Significant nonsense. Yes, nonsense that is not just chaos, that is not just blathering balderdash, but that has in it rhythm, fascinating complexity, a kind of artistry. It is in this kind of meaninglessness that we get the profoundest meaning.
In this high-energy public lecture, Alan Watts explores the deepest metaphysics underlying our images of God. He contrasts feminine and masculine images of God and suggests that when we form images of God, those images are exhibitions of a lack of faith. Recorded at the First Unitarian Church in San Francisco in 1971, this program is called Images of God. Here's Alan Watts.
Now, I'm sure that most of you know the old story about the astronaut who went far out into space and was asked on his return whether he had been to heaven and seen God. And he said yes. And so they said to him, "Well, what about God?" And he said, "She is black." And although this is a very well-known and well-worn story, it is very profound. Because, I tell you, I knew a monk who started out in life as pretty much of an agnostic or an atheist. And then he began to read Henri Bergson, the French philosopher who proclaimed the vital force, the élan vital, and so on. And the more he read into this kind of philosophy, the more he saw that these people were really talking about God. And I've read a great deal of theological reasoning about the existence of God. And they all start out on this line. If you are intelligent and reasonable, you cannot be the product of a mechanical and meaningless universe. Figs do not grow on thistles. Grapes do not grow on thorns. And therefore, you, as an expression of the universe, as an aperture through which the universe is observing itself, cannot be a mere fluke. Because if this world peoples, as a tree brings forth fruit, then the universe itself, the energy which underlies it, what it's all about, the ground of being, as Paul Tillich called it, must be intelligent. Now, when you come to that conclusion, you must be very careful, because you may make an unwarranted jump. Namely, the jump to the conclusion that that intelligence, that marvelous designing power which produces all this, is the biblical God. Be careful. Because that God, contrary to his own commandments, is fashioned in the graven image of a paternal, authoritarian, beneficent tyrant of the ancient Near East. And it's very easy to fall into that trap, because it's all prepared, institutionalized in the Roman Catholic Church, in the synagogue, in the Protestant churches, all there ready for you to accept. And by the pressure of social consensus and so on, it is very natural to assume that when somebody uses the word God, it is that father figure which is intended. Because even Jesus used the analogy, the Father, for his experience of God. He had to. There was no other one available to him in his culture. But nowadays, we are in rebellion against the image of the authoritarian father. Especially this should happen in the United States, where it happens that we are a republic and not a monarchy. And if you, as a loyal citizen of this country, think that a republic is the best form of government, you can hardly believe that the universe is a monarchy. But to reject the paternalistic image of God as an idol is not necessarily to be an atheist. Although I have advocated something called atheism in the name of God. That is to say, an experience, a contact, a relationship with God, that is to say, with the ground of your being, that does not have to be embodied or expressed in any specific image. Now, theologians on the whole don't like that idea, because I find in my discourse with them that they want to be a little bit hard-nosed about the nature of God. They want to say that God has indeed a very specific nature. Ethical monotheism means that the governing power of this universe has some extremely definite opinions and rules to which our minds and acts must be conformed. And if you don't watch out, you'll go against the fundamental grain of the universe and be punished in some way. Old-fashionedly, you will burn in the fires of hell forever. More modern-fashionedly, you will fail to be an authentic person. It's another way of talking about it. But there is this feeling, you see, that there is authority behind the world, and it's not you. It's something else. Like we say, that's something else that's far out. And therefore, this Jewish, Christian, and indeed Muslim approach makes a lot of people feel rather strange, estranged from the root and ground of being. There are a lot of people who never grow up and are always in awe of an image of grandfather. Now, I'm a grandfather. I have 5 grandchildren, and so I'm no longer in awe of grandfathers. I know I'm just as stupid as my own grandfathers were, and therefore I'm not about to bow down to an image of God with a long white beard. Now, naturally, of course, we intelligent people don't believe in that kind of a God, not really. I mean, we think that God is spirit, that God is very undefinable and infinite and all that kind of thing. But nevertheless, the images of God are have a far more powerful effect upon our emotions than our ideas. And when people read the Bible and sing hymns, Ancient of Days, who sittest throned in glory, immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes, they still got that fellow up there with a beard on. It's way in the back of the emotions. And so we should think, first of all, in contrary imagery. And the contrary imagery is, she's black. Imagine instead of God the Father, God the Mother. And imagine that this is not a luminous being, blazing with light, but an unfathomable darkness, such as is portrayed in Hindu mythology by Kali, K-A-L-I, the Great Mother, who is represented in the most terrible imagery. Kali has a tongue hanging out long, drooling with blood. She has fanged teeth. She has a scimitar in one hand and a severed head in the other. And she is trampling on the body of her husband, who is Shiva. Shiva represents also, furthermore, the destructive aspect of the deity, wherein all things are dissolved so that they be reborn again. And here is this blood-sucking, terrible mother as the image of the supreme reality behind this universe. Imagine, it's the representative of the octopus, the spider, the awful awfuls, the creepy crawlies at the end of the line, which we are all terrified of. Now that's a very important image, because let us suppose, just for the sake of argument, that all of you sitting here right now are feeling, well, fairly all right. I mean, you're not in hospital. You don't have the screaming memes. You have a sense, you probably had dinner and are feeling pretty good. But you know that you feel that you're fairly good, because in the background of your minds, very far off in the background of your minds, you've got the sensation of something absolutely ghastly that simply mustn't happen. And so against that which is not happening, and which doesn't necessarily have to happen, but by comparison with that, you feel pretty all right. And that absolutely ghastly thing that mustn't happen at all is Kali. And therefore, at once, we begin to wonder whether the presence of this Kali is not in a way very beneficent. I mean, how would you know that things were good unless there was something that wasn't good at all? Now I'm not putting this forward as a final position. I'm only putting it forward as a variation, as a way of beginning to look at a problem and getting our minds out of their normal ruts. She's black. Well, she, first of all, feminine, represents what is called philosophically the negative principle. Now, of course, people who are women in our culture today and believe in women's lib don't like to be associated with the negative, because the negative has acquired very bad connotations. We say accentuate the positive. Well, that's a purely male chauvinistic attitude. How would you know that you were outstanding unless, by contrast, there was something instanding? You cannot appreciate the convex without the concave. You cannot appreciate the firm without the yielding. And therefore, the so-called negativity of the feminine principle is obviously life-giving and very important. But we live in a culture which doesn't notice it. You see a painting, a drawing of a bird, and you don't notice the white paper underneath it. You see a printed book, and you think that what is important is the printing, and the page doesn't matter. And yet, if you reconsider the whole thing, how could there be visible printing without the page underlying it? What is called substance, that which stands underneath, underneath, stands. To be substantial is to be underlying, to be the support, to be the foundation of the world. And of course, this is the great function of the feminine. To be the substance. And therefore, the feminine is represented by space, which is of course black at night. But were it not for black and empty space, there would be no possibility whatsoever of seeing the stars. Stars shine out of space, and astronomers, very high-powered astronomers, are beginning to realize that stars are a function of space. Now that's difficult for our common sense, because we think that space is simply inert nothingness. But we don't realize that space is completely basic to everything. It's like your consciousness. Nobody can imagine what consciousness is. It's the most elusive, whatever it is, that there is at all, because it's the background of everything else that we know. Therefore, we don't really pay much attention to it. We pay attention to the things within the field of consciousness, to the outlines, to the objects, to the so-called things that are in the field of vision, the sounds that are in the field of hearing, and so forth. But what it is, that ever it is that embraces all that, we don't pay much attention to it. We can't even think about it. It's like trying to look at your head. You know, you try to look at your head, and what do you find? You don't even find the black blob in the middle of things. You just don't find anything. And yet that is that out of which you see, just as space is that out of which the stars shine. So there's something very queer about all this. That which you can't put your finger on, that which always escapes you, that which is completely elusive, black, seems to be absolutely necessary for there to be anything whatsoever. Now let's take this further. Kali also is the principle of death, because she carries a scimitar in one hand and a severed head in the other. Death. This is tremendously important to think about. swept under the carpet in our culture. In the hospital, they try to keep you alive as long as possible in utter desperation. They won't tell you that you're going to die. When their relatives have to be informed that it's a hopeless case, they say, don't tell this to the patient. And all the relatives come around with hollow grins and say, well, it'll be all right in about a month, and then we'll go and have a holiday somewhere and sit by the sea and listen to the birds and whatnot. And the dying person knows that this is mockery. Well, of course, we've made death howl with all kinds of ghouls. We've invented dreadful afterlives. I mean, the Christian version of heaven is as abominable as the Christian version of hell. I mean, nobody wants to be in church forever. Children are absolutely horrified when they hear these hymns which say, prostrate before thy throne to lie and gaze on thee. They can't imagine what this imagery means. I mean, in a very subtle theological way, I could wangle that statement around to make it extremely profound. I mean, to be prostrate at once and to gaze on the other hand, see, is a coincidentia oppositorum. A coincidence of opposites, which is very, very deep. But to a child, it is a crick in the neck. And that's the sort of imagery we're brought up with. So the idea of what might happen after death, well, you're going to be faced with your judge. The one who knows all about you. This is Big Papa, who knows you were a naughty boy and a very naughty girl, especially girl, from the beginning of things. He's going to look right through to the core of your inauthentic existence. And what kind of heebie-jeebies may come up. Or you may believe in reincarnation. And you think that your next life will be the rewards and the punishments for what you've done in this life. And you know you got away with murder in this life. And the most awful things are going to happen next time around. So you look upon death as a catastrophe. Then there are other people who say, well, when you're dead, you're dead. Just nothing going to happen at all. So what you got to worry about? Well, we don't quite like that idea. I think it spooks us. You know, what's it be like to die? To go to sleep and never wake up? Well, a lot of things it's not going to be like. It's not going to be like being buried alive. It's not going to be like being in the darkness forever. I tell you what, it's going to be like
Breaking news.
as if you never had existed at all.
Mayor, river gauge is at 21 and climbing. You lose after driving 30 minutes.
That just there was never anything, and there's no one to regret it. And there's no problem. Well, think about that for a while. It's kind of a and you can't even call it stop, because you can't have stop without start. And there wasn't any start. There's just no thing. Well, then when you come to think of it, that's the way it was before you were born. I mean, if you go back in memory as far as you can go, you get to the same place as you go forward in your anticipation of the future as to what it's going to be like to be dead. Then you get these funny ideas that this blankness is the necessary counterpart of what we call being. Now, we all think we're alive, don't we? I mean, we're really here? That there is something called existence? You know, the existentialists, Dasein, throneless, you know, here we are. But how could you be experiencing that as a reality unless you had once been dead? What gives us any ghost of a notion that we're here except by contrast with the fact that we once weren't. And later on won't we. But this thing is a cycle, like positive and negative poles in electricity. So this then is the value of the symbolism of she is black. She, the womb principle, the receptive, the instanding, the void, and the dark. And so that is to come into the presence of the God who has no image. Behind the Father image, behind the Mother image, behind the image of light inaccessible, and behind the image of profound and abysmal darkness, there's something else which we can't conceive at all. Dionysius the Areopagite called it the luminous darkness. Nagarjuna called it Shunyata, the void. Shankara called it Brahman, that which can only, of which nothing at all can be said, neti neti, beyond all conception whatsoever. And you see, that is not atheism in the formal sense of the word. This is a profoundly religious attitude, because what it corresponds to practically is an attitude to life of total trust, of letting go. When we form images of God, they are all really exhibitions of our lack of faith, something to hold on to, something to grasp. How firm a foundation, what lies underneath us, the rock of ages or whatever, ein fester Burg. But when we don't grasp, we have the attitude of faith. If you let go of all the idols, you will of course discover that what this unknown is, which is the foundation of the universe, is precisely you. It's not the you think you are. No, it's not your opinion of yourself. It's not your idea or image of yourself. It's not the chronic sense of muscular strain, which we usually call I. You can't grasp it. Of course not. Why would you need to? Supposing you could, what would you do with it? And who would do what with it? You can never get at it. So there is that profound central mystery. And the attitude of faith is to stop chasing it. Stop chasing it, because if that happens, the most amazing things follow. But all these ideas of the spiritual, the godly, as this attitude of must, and we have been laid down the laws which we are bound to follow, all this jazz, is not the only way of being religious and of relating to the ineffable mystery that underlies ourselves and the world.
Audio Wisdom titles have been selected from hundreds of hours of original live recordings to bring you the ideas and insights of some of the most important thinkers of our time. Please join us again as we present notable authors and speakers in historic lectures and intimate conversations as they share their thoughts with you in their own words. For a complete catalog of offerings, please call 1-800-969-2888.
There's something else which we
Or go
can't.
to Audio Wisdom, Post Office Box 2309, San Anselmo, California, 94979. Wisdom with Alan Watts. This is Limits of Language. It was recorded in April 1973 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here's Alan Watts.
Tonight, at any rate, we've got to go through some theoretical material, so we're on a head trip. I don't know where the trip will end up. It depends on you. But in order to lay the foundation for this, we've got to examine ideas that are basic to our common sense. Ideas that are very powerful. It's not only emotions that are powerful in human life. Psychoanalysis has, of course, examined the emotional bases of human opinions and beliefs, but one should also examine the intellectual bases of psychological principles, or theories, or therapies, because everybody speaks a language has underneath the surface of the language, or the figuring that he uses, some basic assumptions which are usually unexamined. And these unexamined systems of belief are extremely powerful in their influence over our lives. We'll begin with one very common idea that's built into our common sense, which is that the world, the physical world, consists of two aspects, respectively form and matter. This was foisted on us by Aristotle, and also by the Bible, because it is said that God created man out of the dust of the earth, and as it were made a figurine in his own image, and then I do not give a fuck about what others think of me. I am good. And so underneath that lies the notion that everything material is made of some sort of basic stuff, like clay is the basis of pots. And for centuries, scientists, philosophers wanted to know, what is that stuff? What are we made of? Now look here, a carpenter makes tables out of wood, and a potter makes pots out of clay. But I ask you, is a tree made of wood? Obviously not. A tree is wood. It's not made of it. Is a mountain made of rock? Obviously not. It is rock. See, our language contains innumerable ghosts. Supposing I say the lightning flashes. Surely the flashing is the same as the lightning. There is not one thing called lightning and another called flashing. The lightning is the flashing. It is raining. What is this that is raining? The raining. I can make a noun out of a verb any time by turning it into a gerund. So we populate the world with ghosts, which arise out of the structure of our language, and thus, therefore, of the structure of our thinking, because we think in language or in figuring and numbers. And so it's an intensely fascinating investigation to find out what are the hidden assumptions that underlie language and figuring. In other words, language and mathematics. And here is this basic assumption, you see, that is almost with us all. It comes again and again into our everyday speech, that form, pattern, organization, organisms are made of something. As if there were some inert, primordial, and of course stupid stuff which had to be put into shape by an energy and an intelligence other than the stuff. Like the intelligence of the potter shapes the clay. So therefore, we have a basic picture of the world in which everything is being pushed around. There's a boss. There's somebody in charge who is different from what that somebody is in charge of and puts everything into shape. Because our common sense does not allow that things shape themselves. Very odd. In Chinese, the word for nature is ziran, which is that which is so of itself, the spontaneous. The Chinese have no difficulty in thinking about nature as self-shaping. A Chinese child would not ask its mother, how was I made? It would ask its mother, how did I grow? Which would be quite different, you see. So to be made is to be commanded, and therefore every good being obeys. Whether you obey God, or whether you obey the laws of nature, you obey. And the analog, therefore, of the world that has been put into our common sense is one of military command. Note that. Because the image of God, I would go further and say the idolatrous image of God, which has been handed down to us, is one of the beneficent parent, the boss. Big Papa. So then, when our physicists started to find out what stuff was, they went into it and examined it with ever more minute instruments. They first started cutting up things with knives, and cutting them smaller and smaller and smaller, until the particle that they wanted to dissect was exactly the same width as the edge of the knife. And so they got an atom. And that word in Greek, atomos, means the non-cuttable. Non-tomos cuttable. That's the basic atom. What you can't cut anymore because you got down to the end. Well, they weren't satisfied with that. So they got an atomos. In other words, a particle of something or other that was just the same width as the blade of the edge of the knife edge, and they looked at it under a microscope. And they saw that it seemed to be composed of more small particles. So they found out means of working those out, and then they found out extraordinary means of investigating the properties of matter. Then they reached a point where they couldn't decide whether it was particles or whether it was waves. So they called them wavicles. They thought they had come to certain ultimate wavicles called electrons. But then, unfortunately, everything fell apart, and they found protons, mesons, and many other extraordinary things. Because, of course, what they didn't realize was that as you make more and more powerful microscopic instruments, the universe has to get smaller and smaller in order to escape the investigation. Just as when the telescopes become more and more powerful, the galaxies have to recede in order to get away from the telescopes. Because what is happening in all these investigations is, through us and through our eyes and senses, the universe is looking at itself. And when you try to turn around to see your own head, what happens? See? It runs away. You never get at it. You can't bite your own teeth. You can't touch the tip of this finger with the tip of this finger. This is the principle. Shankara explains it beautifully in his commentary on the Kena Upanishad, where he says that that which is the knower, the ground of all knowledge, is never itself an object of knowledge, just as fire doesn't burn itself. So there's always that profound mystery that you are never going to be in absolute control of what goes on, because if you were, it'd be like making love to a plastic woman. Who wants that? There always is the mystery. The thing we don't know. As Vanderloo put it, the mystery of life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. If there were not that, you see, there would be no life. The reason why certain people turn to philosophy, why I became a philosopher, was that since I was a little boy, I always felt that existence as such was weird. I mean, here we are. Isn't that odd? Of course it's odd. What do you mean by odd? Well, it's what's different from even. I mean, what's odd stands out. What's even lies flat. But you can't see the outstanding without the flat background.